Karachi's police chief said his officers were engaged in an exchange of gunfire with the Taliban, but when it ended with the death of an aspiring Pashtun model who was popular on social media, thousands of people took to the streets in protest. The killing of Naqibullah Mahsood is what Pashtuns describe as another milestone in decades' worth of extrajudicial killings and discrimination against their ethnic community. And Mahsood's death might just be the final straw. Shoaib Hassan reports.
It seems to have sprung out of nowhere, this mass movement that's electrified Pakistan. Years of pent-up grief and rage, all from the ethnic group that's arguably borne the brunt of what's called the war on terror in Pakistan and Afghanistan, the Pashtuns. Protests have been ignited by the killing of this young shopkeeper, Naqibullah Mahsood. Police in the volatile southern city of Karachi say he was a Taliban militant, killed in a shootout. But an outcry by human rights groups led to a judicial inquiry. It determined that Naqibullah was targeted for extortion by corrupt policemen. He was tortured and later executed, despite paying the bribe they demanded. The matter was taken up by the country's Supreme Court. It ordered the arrest of the police official in charge of the unit allegedly behind the murder. Pakistani media and rights groups say the unit operates as a death squad for Pakistan's intelligence agency, the ISI. The officer, Rao Anwar, has now been detained, but only after defying court orders for several weeks. Karachi police records say his units killed 444 alleged militants in shootouts between 2011 and 2017, without itself suffering a single loss. A vast majority of those killed have been young Pashtun men. Human rights groups say the Pashtuns face similar racial profiling in the country's northern tribal belt. That's been the focus of Pakistan army operations and drone strikes by the US. The campaign, still ongoing, has killed dozens of top-ranking militants. But it's also left thousands of tribal Pashtuns dead in what's called collateral damage by restaurant security officials. Meanwhile, hundreds of young Pashtun men continue to be detained by Pakistan's security forces under special constitutional powers. Powers that human rights groups say are regularly abused, as in Naqibullah's case. But his killing could prove to be the last straw.
We are against all cruelty, whether it's from good or bad Talibans, from the Peace Committee or from the ISI, military intelligence or from the army.
It's unheard of for Pakistan's powerful security establishment, especially the ISI, to be so openly criticized. But the voicing of such long-festering grievances is only growing. Will punishing Naqibullah's murderers satisfy the movement? Or will it continue until Pakistan's rulers rein in alleged abuses by the security apparatus? Shoaib Hassan, The Newsmakers.
So for more, let's go to Islamabad and speak to retired Pakistani Army Brigadier Asad Munir. He's also a former intelligence chief. And in Peshawar, we have Mohsin Dawar. He's from the Pashtun Protection Movement, or PTM. And also in Peshawar is blogger Raza Wazir. Gentlemen, I thank you all for joining us here on the Newsmakers. Mohsin Dawar, let me begin with you. Tell me what's driving this movement.
Well, I think the atrocities and the miseries which we have been facing from the last 15 years in different phases has been driving this movement. Initially, we have faced militancy. And for a very long time, we have been tortured and killed by these militants. And this Pakistani state, I think it played a role of a silent spectator or all that time. And after that, against this militancy, they launched an army operation, and we were displaced. We remained in IDPs camps, and we lost our homes, we lost our businesses. And after that time, when we went back to our villages or areas, we have seen everything destroyed, like the markets, were destroyed, the business centers were destroyed, the homes were destroyed, and along with that, we have seen some very extreme level of humiliation and torture of the military after going back to our homes. So all these things, all these miseries, we have seen some landmine attacks, we have seen some collective punishments after that, after these landmine attacks or any kind of attack on the military or on the civilian. So all these things, all these anxiety, all this frustration which we have been facing from last 15 years, it forced us to get out of our homes and talk for ourselves.
Okay.
And at least.
Okay, let me take that and pose it to Asad Munir. And sorry to interrupt you, Asad Munir. So we have Mohsin laying it out there. You have atrocities, you have miseries. First it was the militants, Pakistani Taliban and others, and then in the fight against the militants, these Pashtun people are being scapegoated and collectively punished in this fight. Do you agree that this is a righteous movement in order to try and fight back because something needs to be done?
Yes, you know, this is a movement of young Pashtuns, tribal Pashtuns or Pashtuns from Khyber Pakhtunkhwa, who have grown up in a war zone. They have seen only war, miseries, the way Mohsin Dawar said. Initially, post 9/11, Al-Qaeda, Taliban, Afghan Taliban, IMU, and all the terrorists from all sides, they fled from Afghanistan and they came and took refuge in the tribal area, initially in 2 agencies. So their atrocities, they resorted to beheading. They killed young tribal on suspicion of spying for American or for Pakistani agencies. They saw their elders being killed, the one who were very influential, and they've seen whipping, they've seen all kind of atrocities. So that was one story. And then another one, the Mohsin Dawar said, then the army operation started, then they saw the real destruction. They were displaced, they were taken, you know, uprooted from their houses, and they were made internally displaced people. And then for a long time, the state, you know, it did not react the way it should have reacted. So their grievances are genuine.
Right.
Once they came to Islamabad, you know, they came up with 5 demands. The demands were that there was a police officer who had killed a, you know, this movement was really triggered by that incident.
So
there was a,
if you allow me to come in here, let me expand on that, right? So you have the killing of Naqibullah Mahsood. So we're looking at the context of everything, right? We're looking at the context. There's war, there's terrorism, a response to terrorism. But what they're also saying is that, like with Naqibullah Mahsood, they're saying there's fake encounters, almost like the Indians are alleged to be doing in Kashmir, right? That the Pakistani state is creating fake encounters and actually killing Pashtuns for being Pashtuns. Do you accept that argument?
No, I don't. And, you know, I've been saying the first person who came with their leader, Manzoor Pashtun, on media, I was the one. And I told them that you remain focused on these 5 demands. If you start talking against the armed forces and start raising slogan, you are going to drift from your objective, and it will ultimately you will achieve. You would not be able to achieve your objective.
So that's interesting advice.
You know,
let me ask Raza Wazir, right? Raza Wazir, stay focused on the 5 demands. Don't drift into criticizing the police and so forth. Is that wise advice from Asad Munir to this movement?
I don't agree to that. I say that, you know, the suffering of the tribal people, of the Pashtuns, is due to a certain institution. And that institution is the military. The operations in the tribal belt are carried out by that very institution. And if I'm not allowed to criticize that institution, should I criticize, you know, let's say, customs or railway department, or, you know, the police department, which is not even there in the tribal areas? So this patronizing attitude of Brigadier Saab is very much misplaced. Let's not forget that for a very long time we suffered and we kept silent. The damages we incurred, the demolishment of the bazaars of Miransha and Mirali after the operations were carried out is pointing to something else. So if we are not allowed to even, raise our voices, I think it is not justified. It's not, a same thing to advise to Manzoor Pashtun or the other leaders of the movement. So I don't agree with that.
Okay, so Mohsin, do you also find that advice to focus on the 5 demands and not criticize the police and the army to be patronizing?
Well, I think 4 out of these 4 demands were related to the military. And if we come to the demands, the first demand was the arrest of Rao Anwar. Though he has been arrested, but that was also under the pressure of this movement. Initially, he said that like Nakibullah Masood was a terrorist, but then when we protested and we came out in the streets, they changed their view. It was changed, and an FIR was lodged against him. And then after that, we kept protesting against him, and they were failing to arrest him for a very long time. And finally, when we kept our pressure, he was arrested, but he has been given some very privileged protocol. Like he is being charged in terrorist activity, and he is in a house arrest. Like, what kind of justice is that? So that's why we want to keep this pressure alive, because we fear that he will be let, and the prosecution will not play its role.
Right.
And the second demand, and all the rest of the demands were against the military. Like who is imposing the curfews over there? Who is humiliating the people on the checkpost over there? Who has disappeared? Like, the most important thing which we are focusing on is the missing persons. Who has disappeared these missing persons? Like we have seen in most of the cases, we have a number of people who has been reported, who have accepted that yes, they are in the internment centers with us, and they have submitted these reports in the Supreme Court also, but yet they are not releasing it.
Okay,
so the important demand among all of them is the missing person, and these missing persons are with military.
Okay, so got it, Mohsin. So Brigadier Asad Munir, you're saying by criticizing the armed forces, they're drifting from the core of what they should be achieving. They're saying the armed forces are the whole big problem here. What's your response to that?
You know, there is a widespread perception, which is not a reality, that these Pakistani Taliban, they were created by a Pakistan military, and they could not have survived unless supported by army, which is not true. You know, there are 2 things. There is an Afghan jihad, which was held in, conducted in 80s, where US and Pakistani, they trained Mujahideen, they went there and fought against the Russian. Then there were Afghan Taliban, which was supported by Pakistan. But this organization, which is known as Pakistani Taliban, had nothing to do with the army. They have killed more than 6,000 army soldiers and officers, including 4 generals. They were holding 19 administrative units. They were almost ruling that, 13 from FATA and 4 from Khyber Pakhtunkhwa. Pakistan military is the only army in 21st century that has defeated, these terrorists.
But Brigadier,
there is no area now.
What they're saying is, yes, that's a righteous fight, and go and smash them and kill them, and that's fine. But in the process, you're smashing and killing and persecuting Pashtuns. Ordinary boys, innocent men and boys are disappearing. They're missing. That's what they're saying.
I support their demand. Now you should remember that Rao Anwar is a police officer. He is a notorious man for extrajudicial killing. He was arrested. This was their first demand. The second was that for all extrajudicial killing, there should be a judicial commission. I support their demand. Then they want that the missing person should be produced in court. I support their demand. There is a commission which was established in 2011, headed by a retired judge of Supreme Court. And if you go to their site, they are resolving these issues. If you go today, there will be 75% missing from FATA. Now, if they have 8,000 people, I requested Manzoor Pashtun also that you come up with the list, you take it to that commission. If they don't act on it, you come to the media, I'll be supporting you, the whole media will support you.
Okay, so
if they are in
that's interesting. Yeah, no, that's interesting that you mentioned that. So let me ask Raza Wazir. is that satisfactory? The man saying he supports your movement, or he supports the movement of the Pashtuns who feel something needs to be done. He just feels tactically you might be a little bit off here or there. He's listed a bunch of things that he would support. Do you find that satisfactory?
It is, but in a way, he is putting a but with it. The problem is with the but. If we are not allowed to point fingers at the person who is doing it, we are not going to achieve anything. Our problem is not, with criticizing someone for the sake of criticizing, but our problem is that, these missing people are picked by someone. Produce it in the courts. For your information's sake, let me tell it, between 150 and 200 people have been released by those same people who have picked those people. Why they were released, even they were not presented to courts, it means that they were innocent people who have been interned for 5 to 8 years, 4 years, and 2 years. So it points to something. The demining thing, mining was done by someone in our area. The bazaars were raised by someone. So the problem is not with, approval of our demands. They are just demands. No one can deny that. The problem is with the but thing, that right. You approve of our demand, but in the same line, in the same breath, you say that don't do that in that way. You are not, accepting us the way we want the world to see us.
Understood.
You are saying to us that, present yourself to the world as we want you to be.
Okay, very finally, I've got less than a minute left. So Mohsin, if you could keep your answer brief, I'd appreciate it sincerely. Do you think Islamabad is going to listen?
Well, I guess Rao Anwar was a notorious police officer, but he was still holding his office unless we came out in the streets. And Mr. Asad Munir Saab is saying that we are supporting his demands. But this military, it is not following the law, it is not following the orders of even the Supreme Court of Pakistan. I will say that there was a list submitted in the High Court of Peshawar. We were saying that the military has accepted to carrying about 2,000 missing persons, but they're not producing it in the courts. And similarly, we have got some judgments from the Supreme Court of Pakistan, who has instructed them to release some of the persons who they have accepted to having them in their internment centers, but they are still not releasing it. The problem is they are not following any law. The problem is they are not following any due process. The problem is they do not obey the law of this country. So that's why we are here in the streets, and we are demanding, and we are not demanding any extra judicial thing. We are demanding something which is written in this constitution
Understood.
and law of this country.
Okay, gentlemen, I'd love to continue, but I'm out of time. I have to move on. I thank you very much for joining us here on the Newsmakers. Asad Munir, Mohsin Dawar, and Raza Wazir. Thanks again.